Today's episode is going to be a super practical approach. It's actually a coaching call that I'm going to record live with Brendan, and we're going to talk about setting up a live stream to make it as effective as possible, and also talking about how a live stream can be used in conjunction with a podcast. And so that's what we're going to get into next.
Welcome to The Recognized Authority, a podcast that helps specialized consultants and domain experts on your journey to become known as an authority in your field. Here is your host, Alastair McDermott.
I need to pause there for a moment and say that I'm injecting this at the edit stage because despite me saying a million times through this call, I'm not going to edit this. In the end, I had to edit it. The reason for that is because the audio from my guest was very poor, and I didn't realize just how bad it was until I listened to it back. And there's a huge amount of noise in the background, kind of like ongoing, and I just could not inflict that on you. It's just too bad. So, but that gives me a chance to give you the timestamps of the bits that you might be interested in. So I'm going to tell you so that you can skip ahead to the sections that you might be interested in here. So, and add about a minute onto all of these timings because of this extra intro that I've added. But the first section is planning and strategy. That's about defining goals, target audience, formats, talking about the title. And that's about the first 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, at the 15-minute mark-ish, we talk about audio quality, we talk about video lighting equipment, we talk about live streaming tools and things like that. At the 35-minute mark, we start talking about content format, and we start talking about things like the questions that you ask guests, how to keep the format simple, talking about different segments, things like that. Should you launch with multiple episodes? And then we start to talk about repurposing. We get much more into the repurposing process and implementation at around the 60-minute mark. And that's where we talk about identifying clips and how you actually pick out clips and how you do that. And I actually go really super into detail about my own process for that. And I think identifying and having short clips is super important, because what that does is that gives you this short form content that you can put out that social media platforms will actually distribute, because long form content is valuable, but it does not distribute very well. So you've got to get eyeballs first, or ears. You've got to get people listening or looking at your stuff first, and that's how you reach a new audience. So I think that's super important. If you like this kind of coaching call and you would be interested in getting my help with something like this, feel free to reach out. There is a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and on with the show. Brendan, thank you so much for coming on the show and volunteering to be a guinea pig for a live coaching call. I really appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Cool. And I just want to explain a little bit about some of the mechanics of what we're doing today so that people who are watching or listening to this know what's going on. So I'm actually recording this live, and we're going to later on take this recording and broadcast it as a live broadcast. Now, one of the reasons why I'm recording it live rather than just live broadcasting straight away is because I want to screen share and show you my live broadcast studio, and I can't do that if I'm actually using it. So in order to be able to share my screen and show you some of that, I can't actually use it. So that's why we're using a different tool. And I'm also been playing around a little bit. I just played an intro live in Riverside, which is the tool that we're using here. I played a little video intro just to show you that how that might be done if you're doing that, and to experiment and play around. And that's actually the first time I've ever done it that way. One of the cool things about doing that is it avoids you having to do editing later, and yet still puts your actual like your third party voiceover, it puts it into the audio and the video. So okay, so that's just a little bit of context. Brendan, can you, as a long-time listener, I rarely introduce guests on the podcast in a kind of like in-depth, but I just want you to give us a quick overview so the listener has, or the viewer has, context of who you are and what you're doing.
Thanks, Alastair. I'm, in particular, right now, for the context of this program, I have a startup called Expertscape that with another business partner, and it identifies and objectively ranks medical experts by specific topic. And as one of the things we're looking to do, we're going to kind of make more of a strategic effort in social media and content development. And one of the things we want to do is have a program around live streaming for physicians. And because we identify a lot of experts, I can get experts on the program. And I want to be able to find a way to do that in some kind of very compelling way that I can then, like we've talked about, chunk little clips and allow those to be shared by the experts and by the academic medical centers where they work. So that's my interest in this conversation.
Cool. And apart from that, you're also an expert in sales, right?
Yeah. So I do some sales coaching, and I do some classes and training for early stage startups, and we're focusing on sales and early customer acquisition. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So that's some context for what we're going to do. And so I'm going to let you drive a lot of this call through your questions.
Sure.
And if we screen share, just for anybody who's listening to the audio only version, if we do screen share, I'm going to tell you that I'm screen sharing. There is a link to a YouTube version of this in wherever you're listening to this in your podcast player, but I'm also going to do my best to describe what's on the screen so that you don't actually need to watch the screen share if you don't have access to it. So, okay. So let's start out. I gave you a little bit of homework on our last call around kind of planning your content and identifying your target audience.
Yeah.
So I asked you about your goals.
Yeah.
Who your goal is that you're trying to reach. Is there a primary, maybe a secondary audience?
Yeah.
Do you have that target market? What do they care about? What are the topics you're going to cover? And then things like what the format might look like. So, is it interview format? Is it solo format?
Yeah.
Is it hybrid? Is it something else?
Yeah.
And then as the last part of that, talking about the mechanics of it in terms of what's the title? Do you have cover art and all of that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So, and I know you have a ton of questions.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can try and make this really practical, but do it in a way that makes logical sense for the listener as well. So where do you want to start? What's the most pressing thing that's on your mind?
Well, so for me, my primary audience is going to be physicians, and then secondarily, my audience is the people at academic medical centers that are not physicians, particularly marketing people. They're the ones that promote the hospitals. And so those are the people whose attention I want to get and who I want to be aware of the program. I want to have one of my big concerns is the live stream that I do has to be high quality. It has to be something that people look at and they go, oh, this is well produced. It's got to look crisp and clean, and people are not going to come to listen to the show because of me. They're going to come to the show because of the people I have on. I'm going to have a lot of the guests that I'm going to have on are world-class physicians and scientists from all aspects of medicine and science, and so I want to be able to have them on and create compelling moments that I can then use that they can share and their academic medical centers can share. So having a high quality program is really important to me. And the other thing I think is I'm going to try and keep it very short, 15-minute kind of a program. It's and the title of it is This Week in Expert Medicine. And so a big thing for me is how can I do this in some way that's automatic and that's easy for the physicians that I'm going to interview, and it looks good. That looks good. So, for example, I'm filming this on a laptop, and I'm immediately thinking I need to get a better camera. Things like that. Does that help?
That helps a lot. Okay, so there's a few different ways we can go. A few different places we can start. Let's just first start with the title, okay?
Sure.
So when you're talking about This Week in Expert Medicine,
yep,
that to me sounds like this is a news program because it's this week. So it's something that is relevant if I listen to it that week.
Yeah.
But nobody goes back and listens to reruns of news shows from a month ago or 3 months ago or 6 months ago. It's not relevant anymore. So that there's something there where news is important, and by calling it news or by implying that it's news, you're saying this is something you should be checking out right now because you don't want to miss out. but there's also the implication that this is not relevant next week, and so it's not evergreen.
Crap.
So that is something to think about, because it's really
yeah. All right, we'll have to change it. Yeah. I had not. And you know, I even tested this with several people, and yeah, that's an excellent point.
Because if you've got something where it implies that it's evergreen,
yeah.
and it's something I really try and do with my show,
yes,
is make it evergreen so that somebody in 3 or 5 years time, maybe 10 years time, who knows, is listening, goes back and binge listens to my show, that almost everything, and I think that this is the case, almost everything that's covered is relevant. Now, there are some mentions of tools and websites and platforms and things like that, but most of the topics are going to be evergreen. So I'm just wondering what that might look like for you. So that's just something. And
I'm already thinking about how to change the title.
Yeah. So we can dig into that a little bit more, or we can move on and talk about some of the other more practical stuff.
We can move on, because I get that loud and clear. That's a good catch.
Okay. All right. So next thing, just in terms of quality, right? So I have said this before, and I'm just going to broken record it because I think it's so important to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
Yeah.
So if your audio and video quality are good, then you are seen as smarter, that your work is more important, and you're seen as more likable.
Yep.
If your audio and video are poor, you're seen as less likable, less smart, and that your work is less important. Yep. So it is absolutely crucial to have good audio and video.
Yep.
And so and that comes from Professor Norbert Schwartz from the University of Southern California, who I had on my podcast about a year and a half ago. And this is something I had a little rant with Douglas Burdett on his podcast again recently, the Marketing Book podcast. I actually got this from him because I heard about that study. But this is really crucial. And in fact, I think that this doesn't just apply to live streams and podcasts and things like that. Anybody who's working remotely. So if you're talking to other people, be they your teammates or sales calls or whatever you're doing, you should have the best AV that you can afford.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really crucial.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about then is, in terms of quality, we're talking about the content quality.
Yeah.
So that's the content. That's the actual things that you're talking about, what we're talking about right now. Hopefully somebody out there listening or watching this thinks that this is useful tips and advice for them. That's the quality part.
Yep.
Then there is the audio quality and the video quality. And I say them in that order because the audio quality is way more important than the video quality, even for video, even if you're putting stuff on YouTube.
Right.
Your video quality, people will accept and put up with and tolerate poor video with good audio, but not the other way around.
Yeah.
If the audio is bad, they'll just go to the next video.
Yeah.
And so again, I think it goes to the best that you can afford within what your circumstances are. And now I've got a $1,000 camera and a $500 microphone. Actually, it's probably a little bit more than that. But you don't have to have that. Mm-hmm. But what I do suggest is that you get, the top of the range wherever your budget is right now, and then commit to upgrading it later. There are certain, the jump from going from $20 to $50 is huge. The jump from going to $50 to $500 is not as big. Mm-hmm. And so you don't have to break the bank to do this. But there are certain things, and I'm going to link in the show notes for this, and I'm going to send this to you. I'm going to link a podcasting equipment list. And when I say podcasting equipment, I'm talking about cameras are in there as well. But there are certain things that I recommend. For example, I recommend that you get a dynamic range microphone rather than a condenser microphone. And for anybody who's not familiar with those terms, there is effectively two different types of technologies in microphones that we use. And condenser mics are better quality microphones that pick up everything. And that makes so that they're really great if you're in a sound treated recording studio. But if you're in a home office, like the vast majority of people who are doing podcasting, who are listening or watching this, if you're in a home office, you don't want a microphone that picks up everything. You want a microphone that picks up your voice that's close to it and nothing else.
Right. And
so that's why I recommend a dynamic range microphone. And so the one that I'm using here is a top of the line one called a Shure SM7B, which is really, really common. You see it in all the top podcasts. There are lots of other ones. I'll list the ones that I recommend. I do recommend that you spend maybe $100, $200, and for convenience, I would say start off with a USB microphone. There are other types. The other type of connector is XLR, and I don't recommend that you jump straight into that unless you really want to go kind of dive deep into the techie side of things. But if you get an XLR microphone, then you're going to need to buy another piece of equipment as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's the most technical I'm going to get about that. So, in terms of cameras, anything, there's a lot of different webcams out there. Effectively, the bigger the lens, the better the picture is going to be. If you want a depth of field effect, which is where your background is a little bit more blurred, and that's done with the camera, then you're going to need to spend more. You're going to need to get a DSLR or a mirrorless camera like I have. So I've got one which is the Sony A6100, and then I bought a separate lens for that as well. And again, that gets expensive if you want to go to that extreme, but you don't have to go to that extreme. You can just buy, for example, the best Logitech webcam that you can get, whatever the top end of that. It's going to be pretty damn good. There's a company called Elgato who do streaming, particularly streaming for gamers. But all of their stuff is also good enough and more than good enough for most business users as well. And so the Elgato webcams are all really good as well. So that's in terms of some of those quality issues in terms of getting good equipment. But one of the things about good video is lighting. In fact, lighting is probably as important, or if not more important, than the actual camera.
Right.
So you need to have good lighting on you. And so in the room that I'm in right now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lights and a skylight, and I've got a window that's blocked. So I've blocked off my window with a blackout blind because it's too glaring, the light that's coming in from there. And then I'm controlling the light that's in here with kind of soft uplights that I'm using. And none of those are shining really directly on me. It's kind of just more about filling the room rather than being directly on me. Now, I know that I could actually improve the lighting in here, but it's pretty good as it is right now. So that's just some of the kind of the things that to think about. So just to recap, the audio is going to be way more important than video. So good microphone. If you can get a top level camera, go for it. Setting up the type of camera that I talked about, that once you go into the kind of like the extreme high levels of quality, things get a little bit more technical. So for example, the camera that I've got has a fake battery in it, and out of the bottom of that fake battery comes a wire that goes and plugs into a USB port just for power, because that means then that I don't need to charge a battery and plug it into my camera and keep changing the battery in it. So it's got this fake battery unit, and then it's plugged. It's got a wire that's pulling the video feed off that, and that's plugging into a USB device that takes in the video from the camera and converts it into like a webcam type feed. So there are those things as well if you want to go up to there. And that's why I say, if you don't want to go to that step, then just buy the best webcam that, a USB webcam that you can use, and sort out your lighting, and, think about your background and things like that a little bit as well. And that, you can go to the top level camera later then, once you get comfortable with streaming and you're doing it all the time. Okay. Does that answer the questions around that?
It helps. Yeah.
Cool. So, then the other things to think about in terms of quality. So if we're talking about quality here, we're talking about content. So the content, like what you're actually talking about, the content strategy, making sure that it's relevant for somebody, they care about it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is personality is a part of this. Now, this isn't something that we can control as much, but it is kind of important. And people will resonate and be attracted to people with certain types of personality. And like, for example, a lot of people listen to 3 hours of Joe Rogan talking. And so obviously personality is part of that. It can't just be about his guests and things like that. So and he may not be your cup of tea, but having a personality and displaying that. Like if you look at any famous TV they literally call them personalities. So the personality, it's just something to think about. How, I'm not a natural performer, and so I think about, okay, how can I be authentic, but maybe try and bring in a little bit more entertainment into the way that I talk to people or talk about people, or just have a think about it. I don't really have an answer to that, but I want to address that. Your content quality, your personality, your audio, your video, and your lighting all go into this thing that we call quality, So that help?
Yeah, that's good that you bring that up. That is one area where I don't think I'm going to have a big problem, in the sense that I have a high degree of confidence that every guest I have on the show will be a lot smarter than I am. so I'm leveraging that as part of the entertainment value of this, and that is because these folks are going to be talking about things that I basically don't understand in a lot of cases, or understand it only at a rudimentary level. And so for me, it's sort of a way to kind of allow them to be the smart person in the room and explain things in a way that others can understand them. And so because I'm hopefully it gets to the point where it's useful enough that these people are talking about things that will get consumers, they'll get patients to attend and listen in. If someone is diagnosed with lung cancer, and I've got a lung cancer expert on, they may find that show and that episode and Dr. So-and-so and talking about this, and they may find that very useful. So that's a good observation. But thanks.
Awesome. Now, just before we leave quality, and you just reminded me, and something that you did before the show. I don't know if you did it deliberately. You must have looked at your camera or something. I think you lifted your camera up, your laptop up, so that your camera was higher.
Yes.
It is important when you're live streaming, and it's particularly important when you're recording video for an audience to watch later. It's really important that you try and look at the camera, and that your eyes are fairly close to the camera lens in terms of height. And so, because you don't want to give people the up the nostril shot, or you don't want to be too far down on the screen. You want to be kind of centered on the screen with your head almost near the top of the screen. So if somebody is watching the video of this, they'll see that my eyes are almost in the center of the picture, and actually they should be up a little bit higher for the picture in terms of the picture frame. I'm showing a little bit too much. I probably need to raise my chair slightly or drop my camera slightly. Now I can't drop my camera anymore. So you do have physical constraints in your setup, but you want to be looking down the barrel of the lens as much as possible. And in fact, over time, you'll train yourself to look at the lens instead of looking at the other person on the screen. And that feels to them like they're making eye contact with you when they're looking at you on the screen, and people watching later will feel that as well. And that does make more of a connection as well, because all of these little details go into the difference between good content and bad content, particularly for that kind of video.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And I do find myself looking at you rather than the camera lens. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. It just comes with practice over time and doing it time and time and time again.
Yeah.
And then one of the things is, so I've got two screens that I've got here just below the camera lens. And so what I'll try and do is I'll try and push the zoom window right up into the center corner of one of the screens so that it's near the camera. So when I do look down to check check for body language and all this kind of body language cues that we look at, that it will... I'm not looking too far away from the camera. So again, those are only little minor things, but all of those little minor things together make up. By the way, I know that there are AI tools coming out. NVIDIA, who make the graphics card that I use, have a piece of software that actually changes where your eyes are in the video, and so it makes it so you're looking at the camera. So there's some crazy stuff like that. But for now, just try and train yourself. So that's okay. I don't want to make this thing totally about the physical setup.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to talk about that. Oh, and that just reminds me, the last thing about audio quality. If you are in an echoey room, then what happens is the echo that comes back on the audio, what you want to do is you want to try and have as many soft surfaces and remove as many hard flat surfaces as possible. So for example, pulling curtains closed over windows, not having like a huge mirror in the room. I have big deep pile rugs in my office that I bought, and I'm really happy because they're on brand for color and everything. But the reason I've got those is because they work really well as sound deadening effect. If somebody's looking at this on camera, they can see like I've got some where it's like right behind me. I've got a whiteboard, Google Jamboard. That's actually a whiteboard, digital whiteboard, because I do some training on it sometimes. But all around it are these grey and red tiles. They're actually sound deadening tiles. So these are acoustic tiles. And actually you can actually see the reflection above my head. You can see some stuff reflected, and there's actually more of those tiles on the wall opposite me. And just in front of my face where I'm talking, and on the ceiling and behind the camera, there is the acoustic foam that you'll see in radio studios. And all of that is contributing to deadening the echo in this room, which means that the audio quality is going to be much higher. And so if you don't have all of that and you don't want to go to the trouble of putting all that, some things that you can do is put down rugs. Try a friend of mine, Megan Doherty, she describes this as the messy teenager's bedroom. Having clothes and having soft stuff around the room will trap sound waves and stop it echoing back, because that's what you're trying to do. Is you don't want sound waves going from your mouth to the microphone and also bouncing off a wall and coming back to the microphone a few milliseconds later, because that's what causes the echo. And so killing that big echo. And so I'm going to click my fingers in the room here. So there's no echo coming back from that. And so I'm really happy about that. And you can actually do that yourself and see. Or if you're not sure, there are some tools. I'm going to link to one of them in the show notes. There are actually tools where you can do recording, and it'll give you basically an AI a score for your audio quality and tell you if it's good enough or not. So I'll link to that in the show notes as well, because that's pretty cool. You can just link up you go to visit a website and give it access to your microphone and just do a little recording for a second, and it'll say, yeah, that's good enough, or no, you need to work on this. So that's kind of cool as well. Okay, I'm really done with the audio video quality rant. So what's next?
So the big thing for me is the format is, the way I'm thinking about the format is like 15 minutes sort of a program, and it's a little bit of background on what's happening in healthcare, or some aspect of some profile of an academic medical center or two and what they're doing, and then an interview, maybe 2 interviews. I'm trying to make these interviews very short. Like, these are important people, so I'm trying to get them for 5 to 7 minutes. And then what I want to do is, I don't want them to be live. And this is a fundamental component of a technical challenge that I want to overcome. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, is I want to be able to record a 5 to 7 minute chat with a physician, and then drop that into the live stream, just like some news program that has a remote correspondent, and you drop it in the same way. But I want to make sure, it looks good, and it's seamless, and the quality's good, and all that sort of stuff. So that's to me, and then of course we can go into the other kind of the post-production sorts of things. But in terms of creating the content, that's the thing that I'm going to struggle with the most.
Right. Okay. So a few different things going on there. So first of all, yes, that is possible with the existing technology, no problem. So depending on the Livestream platform that you're using, I know you were talking about using potentially Squadcast. I don't know what facilities they have for live streaming and adding media. Right at the start of this program, I played and embedded a pre-recorded voiceover and video intro. And so you could do the same thing with that. Now, the only thing is, when you are live, shit happens. basically.
Yeah.
So you've got to be aware that, sometimes stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so when you are live like that, I mean, it's not the end of the world. Particularly when you're starting out and you're just learning and you don't have a huge audience, it's not the end of the world if stuff doesn't work right, or you start to play the video and you find out afterwards, oh, the video played fine, but the audio didn't work at all. All of these kind of things. You upload a video and it's the wrong format, or so a lot of that is just comes from practice and experience. But the key thing is the tools are there to do that. So, so I would start out and practice. One of the things is the tools that work may work for a 10-second video like I just had, but may not work for a 5-minute video.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've never used them. I assume that they do.
Yeah.
But if not, you may need to come up with something else.
Well, can a quick question on that then? Is there any advantage or disadvantage to recording a live stream, so to speak, and then but then as soon as it's done, posting it? I mean, is there any disadvantage to that, or?
Well, so first off, it can be seen as disingenuous. It can be seen as you're not really being honest in what you're doing, and that's why at the very start of this, I'm intending to put this out as a live stream, and for obvious reasons. But I did talk about that at the start because I wanted to make sure people understood the context of that. So you want to be honest about what you're doing, so if you're recording it live, you can talk about how this is recorded live, and I don't think people care all that much. For me, the going live is not necessarily about the live audience that I get.
Yeah.
Now, there is an advantage to going live in that most of the social media platforms will prioritize live content over non-live content. Okay. And so that is a pretty major advantage. But personally, I don't care all that much about that part. The big part for me is if I don't go live, I'm much more likely to procrastinate.
Yes.
I procrastinate terribly because I say, oh, you know what, actually I should edit that and make this better, remove that. Maybe I should re-record this, maybe I should do that. When you hit the go live button, it prevents you getting into that procrastination loop and getting locked up. And so that for me is the biggest issue. That's why I like to do that. And I think go ahead.
Well, that's what prompted this whole conversation. Is an episode you had 3 or 4 weeks ago where you talked about how you create your content, and the thing about the live stream idea was the fact that you do it live, and you can't edit it, and so it's much more authentic, and it's also a time saver, and then you go back and take the clip. I mean, I thought that was really genius. That's the sort of stuff that I wanted to focus on, and so that I don't know that I need to have it live, although I could imagine doing it as a recorded live for a period of time and then doing it live after you get the hang of it, and then just dropping them live immediately once you know that, oh, you can drop this clip in and it works and that sort of thing.
Yeah, now that's what I did when I started out. I didn't start live streaming until episode 100. Now I probably could have started a bit earlier than that, but I decided that's when I was going to make that change over. Yeah. And so all before that, up till then, all the episodes were pre-recorded and edited. And so I changed it over to the live stream methodology or process because I wanted to stop procrastinating about doing and publishing video.
Yeah.
And that was a major thing for me because I had recorded 99%, well, I don't know, actually 99%, but at least 90% of my episodes up to episode 100. I do have the video for. I did record video.
Yeah.
I just wasn't publishing it because I was editing the audio, and video editing is much more expensive than audio editing because there's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
And so it's just more time consuming. And so I was sitting on that and procrastinating. And so I just said, okay, no, enough of this. I'm going to start live streaming because then it's done. People can see and listen to the live stream. There have been times where I've said something that I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said it that way. But for the most part, I've been pretty happy with it. Yeah. And perfectionism will absolutely kill you in this world.
Yes.
You have to be able to let things go,
yeah.
Even when it's not perfect, because done is better than perfect. So
totally. Yes.
So that's, yeah. There is something else, and you were talking about the format, and I don't know if you have a specific question lined up for me on what we were just talking about, but I want to come back to the actual content, because like this is really crucial.
Sure.
And my question is, why would anybody listen to it? Like, what's in it for them? Why should they bother watching or listening to the show? Like, what value can they get from it?
Well, I think that first of all, it's going to be aimed at physicians, and it's a little bit of a sporadic audience in the sense that I'm going to have different physicians in different areas of different specialties. So on any given program, there'll be an oncologist or some rheumatologist or somebody, an ENT person or urologist, and so we're going to talk about various different things, and what I'm interested in doing is getting doctors to be aware that Expertscape exists, so that when they need to refer someone or when they need to consult with another physician, they know that Expertscape is there as a resource. So I'm actually not expecting doctors to come back time and time again to watch or listen to episodes unless they're just genuinely curious about medicine. The people I'm really interested in getting are the academic medical centers marketing people, and saying, oh, they're mentioning my doc, or they're mentioning my institution. I'm going to take this clip and talk about it. I'm going to share it because it's my doc, and it just so happens to be in an Expertscape program, but it's Dr. So-and-so, it's Dr. Chueri from Dana-Farber, and he's talking about cancer, and Dana-Farber is going to share this clip in their social media because it's him. And that's really all I care about. So I'm not even all that motivated on having a huge YouTube following. I'm more motivated on having these institutions be aware of the program, show, and take the clips that matter to them and then have them redistribute it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a weird, it's a bit of a weird website, Alastair, and I lead by saying oftentimes Expertscape's out there. I hope you never need to use it, because people that need it, they're searching for someone with a serious medical. They've got a serious medical condition. And they need help. They need to find someone who's really knowledgeable about that. So I'm not really looking for repeat business. I'm looking for people to be aware that it exists out there, and that it's in the event that you need it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because the way that I think about that is I think that a non-standard business model. I think that if we're to pull this back to just the idea of creating content and live streaming, I think that if you can have something where the content is effective simply by virtue of creating the content without even considering the audience. Now, I think that we should consider the audience, and I think that's really important to consider the audience. But if you can be successful, even if almost nobody watches it, I won't say nobody, but almost nobody, then that's incredibly powerful. Because then you don't need to worry about that distribution part and the growth part, which is really hard. And so this is where I really like the idea where people can interview, and I was just talking to a new client of mine last night about this, where you can talk to and interview your ideal clients. And so we're just discussing a podcast where he's going to interview CEOs in his target industry. And so even if nobody ever listened to that podcast, the CEOs, he's now built a relationship with them and built some trust with them by talking to them. Now, of course, it would be good to build an audience for that as well. And I think that you should do. And obviously, you get more eyeballs or ear listens, what do you want to call that. But if you can make it work without having to worry too much about the audience, then that's good. And that's one of the things in kind of like in the B2B sector. Small numbers are powerful. You don't need to have huge numbers. So it depends on your business model. So in this scenario, I think that's really interesting that you can do it that way. So I would just think about the actual content and making it as useful as possible, both for the physician who you're interviewing or the specialist that you're interviewing, and for someone who's potentially listening to it. But it sounds to me like what you could be doing is you could be helping them by creating these, by interviewing them and creating this content. You're actually helping them to create some, like, build their personal brand.
Absolutely.
On, through your website.
Oh yeah, there's no question. They're excited. They're excited to. I have no trouble getting experts on the program. I won't have any. I mean, it's, first of all, they're almost universally fantastic people. I mean, I'm just impressed at how generous they are with their time and how talented they are. And these are people at the very top of the medical world. I mean, that are just really, really knowledgeable, state-of-the-art kind of. And so it's fun to talk to them because they just have very interesting things to say, and they're very committed to their work. And so I just get a lot out of it, just having the chance to talk to them. And so, it's sort of a way to give back and to highlight and to profile them and just say, because these people dedicated just a ton of time and effort and energy to in some cases in very rare diseases and with very little recognition, that sort of thing. So but I think their academic medical centers will take that, the marketing people will take that and hopefully will run with it. And they will too in some cases. They have their own Twitter accounts and so forth, and they've got fans, in certain Facebook groups, they go crazy for their doctors. They just love them. And so that Facebook groups will pick it up and run with it, and that's where I think it could get some traction.
Cool. That's really interesting. I'm just like ruminating on the possibilities and coming back to the title maybe a little bit. And I'm just wondering about like the actual things that you're interviewing them about. I'm just wondering how you can get some story into that, like asking them about, are there specific stories that they can tell you? Maybe success stories of some kind, maybe a difficult scenario or a difficult treatment that worked out well in the end. Like, I know that, like, so for example, if you look Eeyore and all these hospital drama shows, like, people love those. People eat that up. They love that kind of, the tension, the drama, and hopefully the win at the end. Yeah. And so I'm just wondering, like, we certainly have enough negativity in the world, so I think that maybe not focusing on the negative ones so much, but like some of those, the positive stories. Yeah. And so it could be like, some kind of expert medical success stories, and that's a terrible title, but some kind of variation or version of that. So that's just something to think about, and stories make for a really great podcast, and this is something that I'm trying to work more into my own, and I haven't done a great job of it so far, but I'm trying to bring story more into my content. Because like now a lot of my content is educational, and there wasn't really a hell of a lot of story in any of the stuff that we talked about so far, except your story and what you're doing, which I guess isn't important, and that's insightful. that's the story here. But yeah, so I think that what you talk about and ask them about, and I think those, because it's really short, those questions, you need to have pre-planned those questions and put a lot of thought into them, and maybe do a test run a few times with them, and it will evolve and get better over time, like anything does. So how are you thinking now about the format and the questions?
Well, this has got me thinking a little bit more about the fact that maybe I could just do, it's really just an interview, and I could, I'm trying to be cognizant of their time. So I want to go, 5 to 7 minutes, because I don't want to take up a lot of their time, but they're often much more willing to spend time with me. So I might be able to make the interview a little bit longer and just make the show almost entirely the interview. And so I expose the kind of questions I would aim towards would be two types. So the story, I think, is a good idea. I wrote a book on sales, and the feedback I got from most people on it was, I really like the stories. The stories were the best part. And I get that, because the stories allow you to kind of connect, and they resonate. You kind of can apply them. I think whatever the the concept is the story allows you to kind of apply it to a real world situation. So stories would be one aspect, and then the other is, what are they seeing in what are they seeing in their space that's important to note? Like what are they working on, or what are they excited by, or some aspect of medicine that's applicable to them? Because I want them to talk about what they're working on, because it is partly an opportunity for them to talk about success or things that they're working on. And they can use this for a number of reasons. They can use it to recruit clinical trials patients, or researchers, or collaborators, or patients, that sort of thing. So those are the kind of the two areas where I'd see the questions going.
Yeah, I think that if you make this, like I think you said in your pre-notes, you said celebrate the accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I think if you can make it about that, make it about just celebrating the person that you're talking to,
yeah,
and helping them to highlight some of the really cool stuff that they've done, and the really great, something that's happened since the pandemic and all of that is people are more aware, I think, of the work that first responders and all of those types of people,
yeah,
everybody in the emergency and medical services, like the tough, hard work that they do,
yeah,
and sometimes in scenarios where they're not really getting all that well paid for it as well.
Right.
So so supporting and celebrating them, I think, is something that people could easily get behind.
Yeah.
And so the question then is just about making it interesting for the listener or watcher.
Yeah.
So that they get something out of it, because it seems to me, because like often I think about education versus entertainment and that kind of split.
Yeah.
And I think that this could potentially be mostly towards the entertainment side of things. So this is a really interesting story,
yeah,
and you could sneak some education in there, but I would be thinking more about getting the stories from them and
yeah,
making it really fascinating.
Yeah.
But that story can still be something that positions them and celebrates them.
Oh, absolutely.
As the expert.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're still getting the value that you wanted for that, but now the value that you're giving the person who's consuming this now makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is that would appeal. That would appeal as much to the marketing people as it would. That would appeal to the marketing folks in particular, because then that's something that they're much more inclined to share with their audiences, because they're really after referring physicians and patients. And so a story that's consumable, that's understandable by patients would be much more attractive. It would resonate. So as opposed to someone talking about the latest cancer treatment.
Yeah, because that to me sounds like it would appeal to their peers.
Yeah.
And there is a value in that if you're, depending on what you're doing and who you're trying to attract.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe that's a harder sell for me.
Yeah.
Whereas you could definitely reach a broader consumer audience with some of those other stories.
Yeah.
And that's where things can actually go viral.
Yeah.
And, I'm not really into the whole concept of going viral. Great if it happens, but, it's very hard to actually make it happen.
Right.
But certainly if you are making entertaining, interesting, story-based dramatic content, which is what those kind of stories would be.
Yeah.
If you're making that and putting that out on a consistent basis, I think you will grow a larger audience because of the nature of that more entertaining nature of the content.
That's good.
So now I think that at the start, I think that what will happen is you'll get better over time at interviewing people.
Yeah.
The people who you're interviewing as well, some of them will be great at telling those stories and some won't be as good.
Yeah.
That's nature as well.
Right.
So to come back to the format then, because you were initially talking about it being hybrid, where you have an interview with an expert physician on some aspect of the medicine or innovation.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're talking about now is we're talking about actually talking to them about their success stories.
Yes.
And more about the story. And by the way, they can still sneak in some of the technical medical details.
Yes.
And the innovations and things in there as well.
Yeah.
But maybe pitch that to a more consumer audience.
Yeah.
And then you were also talking about profiling maybe hospitals or other news and updates. So how do you feel about that now? Is that still in the cards, or are you changing how you think about that?
That's interesting. I think I'm still going to mention something. I think I'm going to. One of the interesting things about academic medical centers is they like profiling the hospital. They're not all that great about profiling the physician, right? Right. It's a little bit like they want to market the institution or the department. They don't want to profile individual doctors because that doctor might go to a different hospital. It's a little bit like
lawyers and law firms and
exactly
happens all the time.
Yeah.
They want to demonstrate the expertise of the institution because otherwise people may just follow the talent wherever it goes.
Exactly.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what can you do about that, or is there something that you can do?
We now identify and rank hospitals and departments, and so I have an infinite supply of examples where I can talk about Ohio State University Wexner Center, and they happen to be really strong in neurology, and they're working on this and they're working on that. Just so this weekend, or this is just want to give a shout out to what they're doing here, and they ranked highly in all these categories. And every week I could talk about something like that. Just mention that in a clip. And that would be a 45-second sort of a clip, and then I'd share it and tag it, and it'd just be a news thing. And so even if I didn't interview someone, I could profile their staff, and I could list so and so and 4 or 5 people on their staff and how they're all highly ranked in Expertscape and blah 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 in these various topics. Kudos to them. Just want a quick shout out, and then I could do that for a couple different institutions, perhaps. And I'm not, to your point about one of my mantras is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? And so I'm quite happy to start with a format and then adjust it over time. But already I'm kind of narrowing it down to being much more about the interview with just a little bit of reporting on one end or the other.
One thing that you could do there to integrate both of those is you could pick. So let's say there's a particular institution or hospital that you want to pick.
Yeah.
And then identify a person in there.
Yeah.
And as the interviewee, as the guest.
Yeah.
And then during your interview, say, hey, one of the things I'm going to mention, you can talk to them in the pre-show about this. You can say, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to just mention that your hospital is really highly rated in the area of neurology.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call that out. I'm just going to mention that and talk to you briefly about that. Is that okay? And they're obviously going to say, yeah. So now what you're doing is you are getting them to talk about the institution on the interview. And so you're getting that content in there without making it a separate piece. Because my fear is if you make it a separate piece, that people will tune in for the bit that they do want, and then they'll ignore that last piece. So if there's a way to integrate it, maybe you could do that. How does that sound? Excuse me, that makes sense if I'm talking about the same department, probably. So if I'm talking to a neurologist, then I could mention that your neurology department is highly ranked and blah, blah, blah. And you've got all these, besides yourself, you've got 4 or 5 other world-class experts that you're working with and that sort of thing. It's probably a little bit less. It probably doesn't fit quite so well if I'm talking to a neurologist and I mention ophthalmology, for example, or
or urology,
Yeah. So I guess there's two options there. One is don't do it, or the other is only do it when there is direct alignment between the guest and the institution.
Yeah.
So you could do it separately, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
The only issue for me is that sounds like that's almost a separate show or a separate, it's a separate thing.
Yeah.
But you can always bring it in. Like I know that there are a lot of podcasts out there where they'll do a news piece, and then they'll have the guest come on. They'll do like a solo segment or something, and sometimes, by the way, the guest is sitting in the background in the aisles waiting to come on, and the person is doing the 5-minute solo part, and that's just the way they do their podcast, and that's okay, as long as your guests are happy to sit around and wait for that, or sometimes they'll pre-record the guest segment and they'll do the other bit first, but and like all of those options are fine. But the main thing is I like to have alignment between the different segments so that they're all still of value to the same audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that the person who is getting something from the stories is also interested in that last piece. So I don't know if there's a way to make it more interesting. If it's just celebration. You see, if you keep it short, then it by virtue of it being short, people will tolerate it, even if they're not all that interested, because they know that the other parts are coming. And
that is my thinking.
In YouTube, and like this is something where like I'm really aware of it usually in hindsight when I do live streams like this, that maybe we've had maybe some parts of this conversation have been much more interesting towards the end of this conversation than at the start, and there was the start section where we talked about the kind of more mechanical stuff, that may be less interesting to some people, and they may have just tuned out at that point. And so viewer or audience retention is really important as well. So that's just something to think about in the mix where and when you talk about things.
I don't know what's...
And this is what happens when you live.
It's a fire alarm. It happened earlier this morning once. I don't know I can't explain it. Sorry.
So so for anybody who's wondering, we are recording live. So and shit happens. So and that's once you hit go live, that's life. Okay, so Brennan, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. So what else would you like to talk about? What else would be useful for you to discuss about this?
So the intimidating part for me of this live stream thing is, okay, how do I do the production? And this may be a longer conversation, but like what ingredients do you use? Like you're using Riverside. I have Riverside now, but with Descript and Squadcast coming together, I may use Squadcast, and then from there, how do I, what are the components that I would use to post this and because I want to post it to Instagram or Facebook, and how do I do that? Like, how does one launch that?
So first off, we're recording here on Riverside, but typically I use restream.io. Which is a different tool. That's typically what I use to go live. So that's like my live studio software.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're doing this in Riverside was that so I can screen share and show you Restream because I can't screen share from within Restream and show it at the same time. So that's one reason why we did that, in case I needed to, and we haven't done that just yet, but that's just something to talk about. The other thing is I use everything. So all of the different tools I use, it's like, you see, like one of my favorite silly movies to sit down and watch is Commando, where Arnie goes nuts. It's just a great kind of popcorn. You just need something brain dead to watch, and it's just fun. But Commando, just like most of those types of kind of action movies, there's this montage scene where they walk into a room full of guns, and he goes around with a shopping trolley filling it up with guns, right? Yeah. So, but he only takes, he can't take everything. He only takes the ones he needs, right? Because you can't take everything in the room. So that's kind of the way I think about using tools. Like, you've got all these different tools available to you. Like, use the right one at the right time. So I have a podcast called Accelerating Your Authority, which I've got about 20, 25 episodes or so. They're all short form episodes. For that podcast, I want it to be really quick turnaround. And so I actually record those on Zoom, even though the quality is lower, because I want it to be super quick turnaround. And I want to reduce as much friction as possible for the person coming on that show. Yeah. And so I do those calls on Zoom. For the recognized authority, mostly I'll record on Restream because we'll go live. We'll just record live on there. Previously, I used to record on Riverside, which is where I do most of my high quality recordings, because it records much higher quality because of the technologies and the ways that it works. So Restream and Squadcast are both very similar. They're kind of Riverside and Squadcast. Both do this offline recording on your computer while they're also recording the online version, and it uploads. So I can see that yours is 99% uploaded, and mine is 38% uploaded because I'm on a much slower connection, and I've also got higher quality video. And so those two things mean that my upload is much slower, but it's recording this super high quality, pristine version locally on your computer. And so and that's going to give us a really high quality recording afterwards. The Restream version, when you go live, the quality is not as high, and so that's a sacrifice that you have to make if you want to use those tools. The advantage of using Restream is when I go into Restream, I can add, I think I have like 6 or 7 different channels that I stream to simultaneously. So for example, it streams to my personal LinkedIn page. It streams to my personal Facebook, my business Facebook. It streams to Twitter. It streams to my YouTube, and it streams to even to Twitch. And I'm going to be adding TikTok to that soon when I'm enabled for live streaming on TikTok. So that's one of the powerful things about live streaming tools is you can just multi-channel live stream to all of these different places. So
could I record on Riverside and then move it over to Restream and then post everything from there? Is that what you would do?
You can do you can do that if you want to. Yeah. Now, the reason why I personally wouldn't do that is because then I'm not actually doing it live.
Right.
And doing it live is really crucial. A bit that, again, for that procrastination reason, and also just not to be disingenuous. I think it's really important to be honest and authentic about what you're doing. But
for me, I don't in the beginning, I don't really care about that. I really care about just because I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to basically record it, hit and send. I'm not going to procrastinate once I get it recorded. And so, I'm not going to go and edit it.
So perfect. So in that scenario, then you can just, so what you do is you go in your Restream or in any of these live streaming kind of studio tools. What it allows you to do is when you log in, you see yourself just like you're on a Zoom call. You see yourself and you see a spot for a guest. And you can get a guest link to give them where they can come on. And what you can do is there's a go live button. You're not live until you hit that. And you can add all of your different destinations, they call them. That's all the different places that it streams out to. And the really cool thing I like about Restream is your guest can also add theirs. So they've got a little easy button to use where they can log into their LinkedIn or all of their social media as well. So basically you're just reaching that larger audience. And so and your attention is a little bit split because it's kind of getting splintered out to all these different places. So somebody who's watching your Facebook, they're not also going to watch you on LinkedIn. But the cool thing is all of these really small numbers kind of add up, particularly when you've got guests streaming to their audience as well. And so what happens is you're reaching this broader audience. At the end of the stream, when you finish and you hit stop, what happens then is Restream will allow you to download the video that you've just recorded and the audio. And in fact, they've now changed their setup so that they will give you both separately for the guest and the host, which is really nice because when you've got the two videos separately, that's usually higher quality. You can do a little bit more with the editing with that. So that's a really nice tool for that. What I found with Riverside is much better for recording and getting that really super high quality recording. I think that there is a facility in here somewhere, and we had a little look before we got started today, but I couldn't find a go live option. I couldn't find where to turn that on, and I didn't want to mess about with that too much. I just wanted to get started talking to you. But I've never actually live streamed from within Riverside, but it is possible to do it somehow. Then you can even do it from Zoom as well. You can go live from within Zoom. I think that you can only go live to one platform from Zoom, so I probably wouldn't bother to do it from there when you've got all of these better options available. So that's kind of how I feel about all the different options for actually going live.
So my one thing is, because these folks they're willing to they're happy to talk to me, but their time is, getting them at the right time. For me, I probably have to do it as a recorded session. And so I have to record it and then send it out. And I sort of want to drop it into a larger format where like maybe there's an intro and me talking for a couple minutes about so-and-so, and then here's the interview, and then boom, and then done. And so, so would I still do that with Restream?
Well, I mean, you can do. I mean, what you're effectively doing is you're creating a larger kind of video production of video. Like, you're creating one single video file that you're then going to upload and stream from within Restream, if you're going to go that route. Yeah. And so in order to do that, you actually have to produce that initial video. So again, you're getting dangerously close to the world of video editing at this point. Yeah. So once you go into, and I say that because video editing is time consuming, and also the perfectionist tendencies in me start to come out, and that's why I stay away from it. Because once I go there, it's like suddenly I want to change this, I want to fix this, I want to move this. And maybe I should re-record that actually, and I'll get all into it, right? Yeah. So for example, if I was going to edit this video, the fire alarm that went off for a couple of seconds earlier, I would definitely go back and cut that out. Yeah. But because just to make it more perfect, and then I say, Brennan coughed earlier, I'd go and take that out as well, and then suddenly it'd be like, but the way I talked about the ranted about quality for too much at the start, and maybe we should have talked about the format stuff at the start and the quality later, so I would swap those around, and suddenly you're into, well, how do you, do you have a segue there? Maybe I'll record a segue for that. And so suddenly it just turns into this whole thing where it's like, okay, I was just, I just wanted to take out the fire alarm, and suddenly, 3 hours later, I look up and it's,
I totally get that. I'm not quite I don't have quite that level of weakness, that sort of thing. I think I'm going to be much more inclined to get something out, but I do want to try, and I'm a big fan of simplifying things and trying to make them very simple and as self-contained as possible. So that's actually what I was thinking earlier when you were talking about, the two different segments of the show and integrating them, because I agree, like, keep it as simple as possible. Simplify it as much as you can. I really believe in 80-20, which again, 80-20 is the live stream recording, using that, turning that into a podcast, and also turning it into content for different channels, and then splitting it up and using it in short form as well. And that's why I really like this mode of content production. Yeah. But to come back to how does that work for you? You were talking about having a pre-recorded interview and then adding some stuff around it. Yeah. That's okay, but if you can, I would just record it all to tape, live to tape. Yeah. So just do your intro at the start on, like, say, Dr. So-and-so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for about 90 seconds before we get into the interview, and I'm just going to basically do some background intro, and then I'm going to introduce you. Is that okay? And you just set that up with them beforehand so they know that's going to happen. And then I would just record it all in one go and not try and create that afterwards. That's personally the way I would do that. This gives you an idea how much a neophyte I am on this. But can I do that? Record to a certain point, do the interview with him or her, and then hit pause, and then to say to him, "All right, you can go now," and then hit record, and then start back up again. Can you do that where you can start and stop, or is it?
You can. I'm sure that you can, but I don't. I'm sure it's possible in some way. I haven't done it, and we need to look into the tools a bit more to see.
I'll have to play around with that.
Yeah. I'm sure it could be done. I think if you can just do that all in one take and say, look, I know they're busy people though. That's the only thing. So if you can, it really depends. The question for me is, how much value are you and your audience getting from those segments? And that's the thing that I really would think about.
Yeah.
So, does it contribute to your business goals? Does it contribute to the value that the audience is getting?
Yes.
And maybe it does. Like, when you talk about promoting the institutions, the hospitals, things like that, maybe it does. So, and if it does, then maybe there's a way to do that. But I think that you'd have to experiment with that a bit. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Quick question on live streams. Since they're not really live for me in the beginning, and I'm not going to advertise them as live in the beginning, it's like a podcast for me. Do I want to stack 3 or 4 up and launch with 3 or 4 in the in the podcast, or do I start with one and then I just have to crank them out every week?
I mean, it's okay just to start and just go.
Yeah.
If you are doing it and if you are multi-purposing this and making this also into a podcast.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, by the way, you can refer to it as a show, which is a nice generic word that can mean podcast or live stream or YouTube show. You know, it's so you can say welcome to the show. So you can, so I like, if you, particularly for podcasts are, I think podcast can be a great engine for all of the content creation, because once it becomes, like, a podcast is a very easy thing for people to understand.
Yeah.
So if you say to a physician, look, I have a podcast and live stream or I have a live podcast where I interview physicians and medical experts, they will understand what you mean by I'm going on a podcast. It's very clear to them. You don't need to explain. It's like, it's a podcast interview and I'm going to ask you about X, Okay. And so that's what one thing I like about podcasts. The other is, once you've got a podcast schedule, people can start to build their routine around it. They know something's going to come out, and it's also a motivator for you to just make sure you always get that content out on time and on schedule. So it just means, like, for me, every Monday morning, 6:01 a.m. there's a podcast episode out. That's it. I haven't missed one yet. I did have to put out a little stubby episode one time, but I still got something out that morning, and like, that's just the consistency that I didn't have when I didn't have the podcast. I didn't have that consistency when I was making any other type of content. Yeah. So the podcast forces consistency. It's easy for people to understand. Yeah. And also it's just another distribution channel. And so if you are doing a podcast, I do like to have something there so that if people discover it, they can go back and binge listen and kind of see them stacked up. So particularly if you've got short form podcasts, if you could stack up like 3, 4, 5 of them, that would be cool. So it really depends on what the length is as well. If they're longer, you probably don't need as many, you know. But to have something there for people that, like, when you launch a podcast, as far as I understand, maybe it's changed, but Apple used to give you a little boost, particularly at the start in Apple Podcasts. iTunes is one of the most important platforms for discovery, for people finding you. Right. And they used to give a boost for the first 2 weeks in terms of promoting new stuff so that people could check it out. Okay. And so you want to take advantage of that by actually having something for people to listen to. Okay. And then where do you host these things? Like for my podcast, I have Pod Page is what I use for my personal my business podcast. How do you is there a software platform you would recommend as opposed to having a website? Particular website? So my thinking on podcast hosting is, first of all, you should pay for it. If you're not paying for it, then you're the product. Yeah. So make sure you're paying for it. Don't use free podcast hosting. I would tend more towards the larger providers than the smaller providers, because I want my stuff still to be around in 5 years' time. Yeah. And so I would tend maybe towards the larger companies. And then after that, it's just a question of, do I know anybody else who's using it? Are they comfortable with it? Have I got something already? And so I would always look to the one that you're using already, because you're familiar with the platform, and it just reduces some friction. And so if you're happy with Podpage for your existing platform and it's doing all the things that you need, then go with that. I use podcast.co for 3 of my podcasts, and then I've got another one on one called Bcast. And that the one that's on Bcast is just because I got a deal, a lifetime deal for a podcast hosting on AppSumo, and so I just picked it up because it was cheap, and I said I'll probably use that at some point. So there's options out there for things like that. You can change your podcast hosting later. It's just a bit of a pain to do it. Yeah. But you can do it, and So if you're happy with it, go with it, the one that you're using already. And if you want to change, I can send you on and put in the show notes here. I can put on some recommendations. Again, I would tend towards the larger companies just because I want to know that it's going to be around in a few years' time. Yeah. And I've had some bad experience in the website world with a smaller website provider who went out of business suddenly. And that effectively cost me a holiday because I needed to move all of these things over. So now I'm a little bit wary about the smaller providers for that kind of thing.
That makes sense. I could go on and on, so I don't know how much more time we have, but
So look, we're just coming up to 1:13. So what are let me ask. I've got a little bit more time, but I also don't want to make this super long. So
sure.
let's go 3 or 4 more minutes. What are the other things that's in the back of your head about what's priority here?
Well, I think we've answered a lot of my questions. The one thing I have last that I think the one priority question for me is I like the idea of being able to create the clips that come from the episode. So any advice as to how to do that? And you mentioned in one of the previous episodes about how to frame a question so that restate the question so that the person's comment makes sense, or it kind of gels. What advice do you have for creating those clips that can turn into shorts?
Okay, so this depends on whether you want to be on screen as talent as well, or if you just want your guest. So in the scenario where I personally, in my business, I just want my guest on screen. I don't want me asking the question, right? In that scenario, then I would remind them at the start, in the green room before we go live. I would say, look, when I ask you a question, it's really great for the video quality if you can just recap the question or answer the question in such a way that they don't need to listen to the question again. So if somebody starts their answer by saying, "Yeah, that's a great question," I think the best way to do that is, then you can't use that without the question because there's no context.
Yes.
Whereas if they say, "That's a great question," I think the best way to approach blah blah blah, and then so you can cut that out. They've included the question in the answer. I think the best way to do X.
Yeah.
So you can say, look, that also comes with practice, and so it's really hard to train a guest in how to do that in 30 seconds before the interview. But it can be useful just as a reminder to somebody, and some people will get it. Now, I am working with people over time and over the course of months where I'm interviewing the same people over and over again about different questions, and so I can see a progression where they're improving as they, the second, third, fourth time I talk to them, they're getting much better at integrating those. So it's a question of just making sure that the answer that they give is standalone. And then the other thing that I say to people particularly is I watch the length of the answer, and it depends on what tool that you're using, but you can so I have a series of questions that I ask people. And so for my 10-15 minute those short form interviews, I have maybe 8 to 11 questions that I typically ask. Now, some people will take one of those questions and they'll answer it in 5 or 6 minutes, and another person will answer that same question in 30 seconds. And it's really hard to know which the person is beforehand. And so I say to people, look, continue to talk about this. You don't need to give me a really tight, concise answer. You can continue to talk and expand on this, and interpret the question as you like in order to make it more interesting for the person who's listening. If you have thoughts on this, you don't need to make it really super concise. We're not going for concise here, because we can edit it later. We can cut it out later. We can just take the first part. So so that's the way I approach that part. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. That does. And then on the back end, from a technical standpoint, how do you identify those clips? How are you doing
So there's two ways you can do it. One is use AI. The other is don't use AI.
Okay.
So there are some tools like Opus.pro and various other tools. I can't remember the other ones offhand, where they will take videos and they will automatically identify, make best guess. What I found is that right now they're just not good enough for identifying the best clips.
Yeah.
But AI, as it is right now, is currently the worst it's ever going to be. It's only ever going to improve, and so I would imagine that those tools will improve dramatically.
Yeah.
So that's one thing in the future will be usable. Yeah. So for me right now, I have the way that we do it. I have a pretty extensive process, and I'll just explain a little bit of this. And I know that you saw a little bit of this before, and you were pretty intrigued by it. So just to
I mentioned to a buddy of mine, and he said I'd buy that.
Yeah. So right. So the way that I do it, we have the process that we follow. We have several people who work on the clips, and so I'm just going to look for my editing notes and pull it up here. So let me see. I'm just going to screen share. So yeah. So now we're going well over the. We're going to be 1:30 or something.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm okay if you are. So right. So I'm sharing a Google Doc, and in this Google Doc, the title is TRA for the Recognized Authority Video Clips Editing Notes 1.5. Now, this is effectively an SOP document that I've created for my VA and for my team who do the video editing. And so the goal is to make short video clips from an input video, which is usually an interview. In this. This SOP document, I don't want to share the whole thing because I don't want to give away like the whole cake to everybody.
No, I get it.
I want to like I'll go through just a little bit, and I am screen sharing here. There's three roles that we have. We have a project manager, we have a content manager, and we've got a video editor. And the project manager basically manages the whole process start to finish. The content manager is a person who has some skills in identifying the clips and in actually creating the titles, which is something that we use AI to help with. And then the video editor basically just does the editing and the production based on what the content manager identifies and tells them to do. And then the inputs that we have to this whole process are the long form interview. And then from that long form interview, we also create a transcript. And so the transcript is usually an automated transcript from a tool like otter.ai. And there's loads of other ways that you can get transcripts, Descript, and all of these other tools will create. And then we also have brand guidelines. So that's like the colors and fonts and things like that. Yeah. And then we used to have video end cards, but now actually we just have a call to action, which is on screen all the time. And then we have a spreadsheet which helps us to track all of these. And this is an image that shouldn't be there. And so the output then are the short video clips, and these are usually 40 seconds to 59 seconds. I don't want to go over that 60-second mark because I want to make this something that I can use on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I want it to be able to go on all the channels. Anything else, X, Blue Sky, all of those different channels. And then in this document that I'm showing on screen, I'm just showing that I've got some examples of what the output video should look like. And then the SOP then goes through step by step how we create that. And so in the process that we have, our project manager kicks off the whole thing and manages the whole thing. And they give to the content manager, they give the long form video, they give the transcript, the brand guidelines, and anything else that's needed. The content manager then takes that and starts to identify the clips. And I will just give you a little bit of the detail here. When they're looking for the clips, they're looking for several things. So they're looking for actionable advice, recommendations or tips. They're looking for repeated key phrases or important ideas. They're looking for surprising or unexpected answers, something where somebody says, wow, that's really interesting, or I didn't realize that. And then they're looking for stories or personal experience. So somebody sharing a journey, and again, those make for great clips. And then they're looking for interesting facts or statistics. And then more generic, strong or impactful answers. So those are the specific things that the content manager is looking for. Now, my content manager is going through the transcript. Some people prefer to watch the video, particularly if they're editing it or something, if you're editing. But typically, the way my team work, they go through the transcript.
Yeah.
And then they're noting the timestamp.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is they've now found a clip. They're saying, okay, that looks like a good clip. Here's the timestamp, and here is the transcript of the segment that I think is going to be really interesting. So now they can say to the video editor, in this video, here's the timestamp and here's the transcript of a section that seems like it would make for a good clip. And they also know, because we're using not Excel, we're using Google Sheets. And so in here, I'm just showing you an example. Let's take this one here. This is from Alan Weiss when he was on the show in episode 62.
Yep.
And so when I paste in, this is one of the sheets that we use to manage the picking out of the clips. So you can see I've got different columns here. So we've got the timestamp, we've got the transcript, and then I've got a character count. And the character count of the transcript actually tells me how long it's going to be in time. Because I know that if that character count is below around 850, then it's going to be around 50 seconds of audio. Now, it's going to be different. Different people speak quickly. But so what we're able to do is we're going to be able to identify how long is that clip going to be just by the length of it. And then, so what the next person then takes over is the content manager the next thing they do is they use ChatGPT, and they ask ChatGPT to make potential titles based on the transcript. So they take the transcript, and we have a prompt for this, and let me see if I can find it here. So act as a professional copywriter, write 15 options for an impactful marketing headline in the style of Copyblogger for the following text, and keep it to 5 to 9 words in length. Make sure the titles accurately reflect the main points in the text and generate curiosity in the minds of the reader. Use title case. Okay, that is the prompt that we use, and then we give it the transcript text, and then what ChatGPT comes back with is a list of 15 potential titles. And now my content manager looks through those and highlights the ones that they think will make for the best title. Now, currently, I am then taking the potential titles and I'm choosing the one that I prefer, or maybe merging them. I want to hand that off to my team 100% so that I'm not involved in this step at all. And so basically I'm training them in how I pick the titles. So now what we've got is we've got a title, we've got the transcript, and we've got the timestamp for the video. We give all of that to the video editor along with the brand guidelines, and the video editor creates the video. And that's how the whole thing works. And so and there are some notes here in terms of the production. The final running time should be 35 to 59.9 seconds. We have to keep it below 60 seconds. Remove filler words, repeated words. Show the speaker for the majority of the video. You can occasionally cut to the other participant who is not speaking, but show them nodding or looking at the camera. Don't use footage of the non-speaker showing them looking not directly at the camera. And then I'll talk about, we typically don't use B-roll for these types of clips. Captions should be burnt into the video. That is, the text should be embedded in the video. And then we create a title card, which is basically where the title flashes on screen for half a second at the start of the video. And the reason for that is it's in the first frame then, and it gets picked up because most of the social channels will crop the top and bottom off. And the top is normally where we have the title.
Say that again. Can you say that again for me?
Okay. So when you take, and if you look at any Instagram or TikTok or any of those types of where you've got clips side by side. What happens is the top and the bottom of the video are usually cropped out. So these vertical videos, they make them closer to a square. They don't make it a perfect square, but they make it closer to a square. So what happens is if you have the title at the top, it's going to get cropped out when it's shown in that array of different clips. And so what you want is you want the title to be on screen for people to view it. And so in order to do that, you need to put the title closer to the center of the video. Now, mostly in the center of the video is the person's face. So you want it down a little bit just below that so that you can see some of their face as well. So there's a few little details that you've got to get right
good.
there.
That's good.
So so you want that, and so your title is then shown. So when you go and look at somebody's TikTok or their Instagram, let me just see if I pull up my Instagram here. So if we go to my Reels page, so I'm looking at instagram.com/whatstrategy and clicking on Reels, you can see, you can see that on these where you've got that. I recorded this one separately, which is why it doesn't have, but most of them we've got a cover that's visible. So you can see as you look all the way down, you can see all of those titles, and they're showing on screen, and they would not be if we used it if we just left it at the top, because when I click in, I don't want to actually play the video, but you can see that just up here, that when we're playing the video, the title is up here. So okay, so for anybody who is listening to this, thank you for bearing with that. But yeah, great. So you can check out my the Reels page on my Instagram, which is What Strategy, and you'll see what I'm talking about there.
That's great.
So okay, Brandon, I think I'm going to stop my screen share. Yeah, so I think that gives you basically an overview of how we pick the clips and some of the details you need to think about. Oh, there's one other thing I didn't mention. It is in the document, which is audio leveling. And that means normalizing the audio. So when you've got two speakers particularly, so if you were really quiet, if your microphone was really quiet, I might turn up my volume on my computer while we're talking so I can hear you. But when it records it doesn't turn it up the same way. So your audio might be really quiet compared to mine. And so when we've put that out as a podcast episode or as a video, we want that to be normalized. That's what we call it, where basically the levels are the volumes are pretty similar. And so in order to do that, there are various tools that you can use. We use a tool called Ophonic. There are other tools that you can use, Levelator, different tools. But basically what they do is they take multi-track audio where you've got more than one speaker, and they make it so the speakers all sound the same at the same volume. And some of them do some cleanup as well of background noise and things like that if there is. So you can also do this in video editing software. So, for example, you were talking about using Descript earlier. There are ways to normalize. You can normalize to a LUFS level, which is basically an audio level. It's the LUFS is basically it's the acronym for what is the standard of audio that you're going to. And so you can do that. You can and should do that as well, so that when somebody's listening to it, first of all, they can hear you. They don't have to turn up their AirPods all the way to the top. They can actually hear you speaking when they're listening to something else and it goes yours. And the other thing is that they don't get blasted out of it if your stuff is too loud.
Right.
So So okay, so that's audio leveling as well. So that I think that's a comprehensive approach to all of the different aspects of live streaming and then turning it into video clips as well.
No, this is really good. This is what I was, I could keep going, but this has been hugely helpful. I mean, just in terms of understanding.
We're at 90 minutes, so I'm gonna call it.
No, I think it's good. No, I appreciate it. This has been fantastic. I love the conversation, and it was like I said, what motivated me was one of the previous podcasts where you got into your methodology, and I thought, this is what I need to focus on. So
awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing your go live notifications popping up in my feeds, and I want to see what you do and what you call it, the format that you choose. And then the other thing is, I like the number one thing is just start. And we'll figure out the rest later, but just start it, because once you're moving, you can react and change. But until you start, you can't.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, don't look for this week in expert medicine.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that's been useful for you.
Very good. Yeah, that's a big help. Thank you, man. Yeah. So this is going great.
All right. Well, Brandon McAdams, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Alastair. See you, man. Bye.